thanking everybody who has come today for this special memorial in honor of my mother's life partner, Shri Virendra Singh Jafa, our father, Asim Jafa, and my father-in-law to Maria Jafa, and grandfather to Ashira, Tanaya, Suvit, and Arsh. From our small family, we welcome all of you. And it's a very unusual time that we as a human community are challenged, not only in terms of our bereavement, but how, as human species, as human animals, as animals, social animals, that we naturally get together on occasions of birth and death, marriages, and festivities. But today, we have crossed this thanks to my friends, um, a very close friend of mine, and he has enabled us to come together on the Zoom link. So, without any delay, this is going to be a short memorial, and I hope all of you, and thank you, and we again humbly thank you. My brother will formally open the meeting after the initial video, and then we will have some panelists coming on board, speaking just for a minute, and then finally a PowerPoint presentation on my father's short journey, a remarkable life. And then my mother and I will recite a few mantras. So welcome. Niladri, can you have the first presentation?
Karta Purukh Nirbhau Nirvair Akal Murad Ajuni Saibhang Guru Prasad Jap Ad Sach Jugad Sach Hai bhi sach Nanak hosi bhi sach
bandwidth problem.
I now invite my brother Asim Jafa to open the meeting. Asim.
Welcome, everybody. We are honored and grateful that you all can be here to share a few moments with us to remember Daddy. It's now a little more than a month since he left us, a victim of this terrible disease. But today is not a sad day. Instead, we'd like to celebrate someone who you all have known and who brought joy and happiness to so many with his foresight, his compassion and generosity. Many of us have benefited and seen how he stood back, tried to let us bask in that success. The circumstances did not matter, whether it was getting food for soldiers who were fighting for a country when regular supplies stopped, or whether it was to start a school in a forgotten village, or anyone else. Of course, there was another side to him, the joy of living, the small pleasures, the humor, the foibles. He and Amma together, which for more than 60 years, have loved gardening. Whether it was a rose collection on a tiny balcony of a small flat or an exotic shrine nurtured in a garden. The lime tree never failed to give limes at any time of the year, and they made sure that the mango tree in our garden, when it gave its bounty, was shared. Thank you. Welcome once again.
This is a very poignant moment because he was quiet, but he was a very alive person. And with a in his eye, I welcome now one of his oldest friends and also his brother-in-law, Dr. Owen Srivastav, who married my mother's sister later. So, Mosaji, welcome, and we would love to hear your experience of our father.
Thank you, Asim and Navina. Giving a eulogy to a man of so many multifarious qualities is a very difficult task. But Veer, Shri V.S. Jafa, or as Veer, as I called him always Veer, was a man of infinite qualities, a very friendly man, a very sincere man, a very upright man, and always willing to help anyone in need. I have had the privilege of knowing Veer for more than 70 years, to be exact, 73 years. We both entered the government intermediate college in Allahabad and lived in the hostel next to each other. And then when we went for our BSc at the Allahabad University, then again we lived both next to each other in the Diamond Jubilee hostel. And after doing my BSc, I moved to Lucknow to do my medical studies. And as luck would have it, Veer also moved to Lucknow to do his law degree from the Lucknow University. And our association steadily deepened. And with his marriage to Mano and my marriage to Mano's younger sister Indu, that relationship steadily became stronger and stronger. And he was a very affectionate person. And to give you an instance of his affection, in 1968, I suffered from a dengue fever in Kanpur and almost had a near-death experience. And at that time, Asim and Navina, both of you were very young, and it was difficult for Veer and Mano to leave the children, small children alone. And yet, they came one by one to see me in Kanpur. It was such a kind act. I have never forgotten that. Our association and friendship steadily grew. We were friends. We were brothers-in-law. And in fact, I looked upon him as my own brother. They all, my friendship, my status as a brother-in-law and my status, they all fused into a relationship like a brother. Veer was a great soul and will be greatly missed by all of us and his family, of course, and all those who came in contact with him. May his soul rest in peace, and may we all gather enough strength to bear his loss.
Thank you, Mosaji.
Thank you
so much on behalf of my mother and here. Thank you so much for being a part of our journey forever.
It is our pleasure.
And I would like to invite Mr. Gyan Prakash, who belongs to Daddy's service, Indian Defense Account Service. But in the later years, Mr. Gyan Prakash became Daddy's very close friend. In fact, when Daddy contracted COVID, he called him up and he said, I will be coming back from the hospital. Do you know where I can quarantine in terms of which guest house I can use? And I think that was the last conversation they had before he left for the hospital. So I welcome Gyan Uncle, and I'm sorry your name has been again spelled wrongly. It's Janan. So my sincere apologies, and on Amma's and our entire family, we welcome you into the family.
Thank you, Navina. Good evening, ma'am. Mr. Jafa and myself, we belong to Indian Defense Account Service, but he was much too senior to me. I was a very junior colleague to him. Also, I worked under him. Later on, we knew each other rather well. We started knowing each other well, in fact. Mr. Jafa was a multi-dimensional personality. He was endowed with a brilliant and sharp mind and also a very kind heart. For many of us in the service, he was the perfect role model. In fact, even after his retirement, he served government of India for quite a long period. He was invited to be a member in various committees and various other fora and study groups. And his contribution was always valued. He kept abreast of contemporary developments and often surprised the young officers with his incisive thoughts and his depth of understanding of subjects related to defense and also the Indian Defense Account Service. He was a patriarch in a very true sense. He nurtured officers, he guided them, he mentored them. And after retirement, we have a small group of officers, all retired, and we have a monthly lunch organized under his leadership. Of course, this custom was started much earlier, but later on, he has been our patron. He was also very affectionate to all of us, telling us anecdotes from his brilliant career, and like a grandfather taking pride in achievement of our children and grandchildren. And his total demeanor with us was so friendly. He never let us know that he is such a senior person. Even to the persons who are much junior to me and who are today members, he behaved like a good friend, a senior friend only. In fact, educated love was something which is very enviable. It was envied by many of us, and we tried to emulate that. And I remember that when he was appointed as Secretary of Defense Finance, there was quite a bit of murmuring as he had superseded probably 5 or 6 of his colleagues and even seniors. This was not very common in Defense Account Department. And people were naturally a bit, senior people were a bit unhappy. But he took it into his stride. He went to meet the then CGDA and told him that it is fate that put him in that post. But we had 2 options. Either we sulk or we creep or we join together and help this department grow. And this had a very salutary effect. Later on, the same CGDA organized a gala gathering and a dinner in his honor, that it was the first time somebody has come as a Secretary of Defense Finance from IDS. Prior to that, there was no post. In fact, one earlier, Mr. A.K. Chanda probably was in that post.
Thank you, Uncle.
Thank you so much. It has been a pleasure knowing Mr. Jafa. And I only hope that many of us continue his memories, and most of us will continue with.
Thank you.
Thank you.
On behalf of our family, the Jafas, I would like to welcome my youngest uncle, Yatindra Singh Jafa, retired IPS officer, who daddy was very, very proud that his two younger brothers, one made it to the IAS and one made it to the IPS. And in fact, there used to be a joke in Badayu from where they have come. And people would often ask my grandmother, from which flour mill have you eaten the flour that your children are doing so brilliantly? So, Chachaji, welcome. Welcome and thank you for representing our family.
Thank you, Navina, Bhaviji, Asim, dear Navina, ladies and gentlemen. It's my privilege and honor to say a few words on this occasion. My Veer Bhai Sahib was our eldest brother. We were a very large family, 6 brothers. I was the youngest. And being the youngest, I took a lot of liberties with my eldest brother. I hope he would mind if I take a few liberties today with, I'm sure he must be smiling on us from the heavens. Since he was the eldest, my mother ordained that we would all call Veer Bhai Sahib Bade Dada. Now, Veer Bhai Sahib took his status very seriously. Rather so seriously that we started resenting it. So we corrupted his name from Bade Dada to Baroda. And behind his back, we would make fun of him. We were other 5 brothers. We used to pull his leg, but whenever he appeared, we'll quieten like frightened mice. And he had an advantage which we didn't have. That is, he had the backing of my mother, who was always ready with her stick. But all said and done, my brother was a very decent soul. He was a mild-mannered, God-fearing, kindly person. He was always helpful and gave his material and moral support to whoever needed it, whether within the family or outside. He was meek. In fact, he was so meek that I used to tell him that you are a man of imposing modesty. He tolerated a lot of nonsense from all of us. Sometimes I feel guilty that we younger brothers were nasty to him. Then I realized that this was not the right thing, and I mended my ways. And whenever any other sibling was nasty to him, I would tell my brother, Veer Bhai Sahib, to take steps, corrective steps. And you know, he had just one single sentence or his reply. He used to say, "Arey bhai, मुझे तो सभी गालियां देते हैं, ये भी दे देगा तो क्या फर्क पड़ता है?" He was forgiving, and it was not in his nature to carry grudges. He did not want to annoy anyone, did not want to hurt anyone, did not think ill of anyone. These are these are rare qualities. And today, we very fondly, but with great sadness in our heart, remember him. I am sad because I have lost a dear brother. I am also sad because his passing was an untimely event. Even at his ripe age of 87, he was physically and mentally sound. I'm sure if COVID had not infected him, he would have enjoyed several more years of hale and hearty life. But then we all have to come to terms with fate. And no one has said it better than the great poet Zauck. With your permission, I'll just recite 4 lines from him out of this poem. Lai hayat, aaye kaza. Hayat means life, kaza means death. Lai hayat, aaye kaza, le chali chale. अपनी खुशी ना आए थे ना अपनी खुशी चले. And then permit me to quote 2 more lines from the same poem, which is addressed to an old man like me who is 78. दुनिया ने किसका राह फना में दिया है साथ. राह फना means road to death. दुनिया ने किसका राह फना में दिया है साथ. तुम भी चले चलो यूं ही जब तक चली चले. Thank you.
Thank you.
Before we come to the last part of our session, I would like to welcome Mr. Sanjeev Mittal. If he's on our panel. He's heading the Defense Account Service these days and has been extremely kind to our family in this very challenging time. Sanjeev Bhaiya, we welcome you and would like you to say a small 1-minute remembrance to our father. आप म्यूट करिए, unmute करिए.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, sir.
Yes.
So, on behalf of Defense Accounts Department and on behalf of all the officers of IDAS cadre, we pay our obituary to Shri Virendra Singh Jafa, a very senior officer of the cadre, on his untimely death and in very uncommon circumstances. I remember to have joined the service in 1984 when he was already holding a very senior position in Government of India. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah. And when he became FADS and later on became Secretary Defense Finance, the entire cadre was quite upbeat that for the first time probably an officer from IDS cadre had taken the position as Secretary Defense Finance. That was way back in 1987-88. Later on, he retired as Secretary to Government of India in BICP. He used to participate in all our gatherings of IDAS and he would ensure that he speaks to each one of the officers present there, especially the younger ones, because he would like to interact with them. He would like to share ideas. He would like to mentor them. And he was very good at that, I must say. He had a phenomenal memory, I must say, because he would remember each and every officer's name and where was he posted and what he was doing. If you meet him once, he will never forget him in his life. I met him last in January or February this year in IIC, where Navina had organized a show. And there also he was very happy to meet me and my wife, and Mrs. Jafa was also there. And he was telling me that we would meet very soon. But then the COVID happened and we were not able to meet. He spoke to me about a month and a half ago. And there also he mentioned that we would like to meet very soon. But unfortunately, that was not to be. And due to COVID, he breathed his last month. So we are very sad, and we pray to the God, pray to Almighty that the family is able to bear this irretrievable loss, irreversible loss, and may the soul rest in peace. Dhanyavad.
Thank you.
So, we open the last part of this memorial. As a daughter, I curated a small presentation in the idea of my father, a metaphor, a tree of life. And we have put together with great difficulty a small presentation. It ends with a small two things. There'll be at the end one, a very interesting capture of his life, but also at the end some a song by a friend of mine, a very dear friend of mine, Dr. Subhadra Desai, and one of the priests who never met him, but he would talk to me because I would write very regularly for the Hindu, and I would consult him on certain articles. And Pandit Anil Joshi, he said, I would like to say a 1 minute word. So, and then at the end, just before we end, my mother and I will want to recite, and my Mosi will want to recite some Vedic mantras before we sign off. So we welcome you yet again. Please do watch this small presentation. Thank you.
Virendra Singh Jafa, a homage from a seed to a nurturing tree, a remarkable journey. Born in 1932, in this fantastic house built by his grandfather, Shio Narayan Jafa, his parents were Shri Harish Chandra Jafa and Prakashwati Jafa. But young Virendra, or Veer as he was called, was very close to his remarkable, dynamic grandfather called Shio Narayan Jafa. In this picture, he sits on the lap of his grandfather. His grandfather was a very famous lawyer, and he would take his favorite pota or grandson to many adventures of hunting and of his ventures in Delhi and courts, where young Veer would also enact the story of being a great dynamic lawyer and the patron of his family. In the 1940s, Shio Narayan Jafa was able to get a consecrated Guru Granth Sahib and convert many thousands of young people, old as well, into Sikhs in Badaयूं, and the first Gurudwara was opened in his home, the Jafa house. Here you see Shri Virendra Singh Jafa leading the Guru Parva in the 1940s. In 1947, whenever the trains from Pakistan would come, Shio Narayan Jafa, it apparently is that he would stop the trains and he rescued and gave refuge to thousands and thousands of people, gave them money and gave them refuge in the house and rehabilitated them in these very rapturous times. It wasn't very unusual, but all the brothers were converted into Sikhs. There were 6 of them and 2 sisters. And this is Sardar Virendra Singh Jafa. From an early age, He was responsible for all his brothers and sisters, and here you see him as a young 14-year-old taking his young siblings to Nainital for a holiday. He got married in the 1950s to Manorama Johari and then Jafa, and they were always connected. They would venture far and wide, encouraging each other in a fantastic partnership, both towards the family as well as to the world. As a young man, he also his journey was remarkable. He started in the Badaयूं Government School, went to Allahabad University, Lucknow University, where he studied law, sat for the civil services. For the first attempt, made it into the Indian Police Service, then sat again and came into the Indian Defence Account Services. He went to the UNDP and went to MIT, came back and retired as Secretary to the Government of India. Thereafter, he never thought life had ended post his retirement. In the United Nations in the 1970s, he took his young family and went to Dominica, West Indies, a windward island between two French islands. There we remember how the family met Prince Charles playing cricket and the famous carnivals and the songs going, it was Gavaskar, and Gary Sobers and the rest of the West Indian cricketers looked like second-raters. Mr. Jafa introduced his children to not only the ocean world of the Atlantic, but also to various other aspects of even getting the betel leaf from Trinidad and Tobago. And he had a green thumb, so he would grow a lot of flowers and pots, but he was very fond of gardening because that was his de-stressing, which he would do. His days in MIT, after earning quite a bit from the UNDP, he decided not to buy a big car or a big bungalow, but go on a sabbatical. And he went to MIT, worked with Professor Poole, the famous Professor Poole, in public administration, doing a whole program on malnutrition. His days in the government also had some unusual landmarks. For instance, Vijay Kelkar, Chairman 13th Finance Commission of India and President Indian Statistical Institute, Calcutta, he met his daughter one day at the India International Center, and he said, "Are you Mr. Jafa's daughter?" "Well, I remember your father, not only because he was Chairman Finance Commission of the Union Territories of India, but he is known in our memory for framing the financial model for the missile programs and defense production programs, which has been emulated by the other agencies." I remember that when Dr. Kalam became the President of India, my father and my mother went to greet the President in the Asiad village, and he gave his card, which read, "Retired Secretary to the Government of India." And Dr. Kalam came out and said, "Sir," and my father said, "Please don't embarrass me, for now you are the President of India." In one of my talks with my father, he candidly told me, yes, it was great. It was great coming up with the idea of Speak Post and many, many other innovations, which of course non-cognitive civil servants rarely admit to. He was first and foremost a family man. He was a guide, he cheered, but what was his remarkable character? Not only was he wise and patient and never quite reacted, but with just a smile or a twinkle in his eyes, he always cheered for everybody from the wings. A confident man who didn't mind cheering his family, and all those he came across in his life. With each of his children, including Maria, his daughter-in-law, he had a special relationship. And he always changed his roles. As he grew older and we grew older, he was our confidant, our guide, and perhaps sometimes a very irritating person because he was always so very, very quiet about and he seemed to be unemotional and non-reactive. My mother would always say, he keeps looking at me for these 64 years. Why? So everybody in the family would say, thank God he's looking only at you. He was truly a family man. These are his grandchildren, both my brother Asim's family and my family of my two sons, his grandchildren. An indulgent grandfather, a guru, a friend, a learner, always in touch, watching cricket matches, getting interested in what they were doing all the time, guiding them. Ashira, Tanya, Suvid, and Arsh. For his brothers, he was all out there from the age of 15 when he took them on a holiday till date when he walked into the unknown. He was always there, guiding them and perhaps irritating them, and in full indulgence with his friends and family members. For my mother, his wife, Manorama, he was the iron man behind her success. He cheered on as she went up to the stage to receive the Padma Shri, and he cheered on when she was honored with the Star of the Rising Sun in Japan. He cheered on for everybody, his colleagues in the office and his classmates and everybody. He made it a point to call up even the widows of his friends. And he would say, what can he do for them? He would go to the vegetable vendor and the fruit seller till late, and he would say, do you know how you can save money? And he would give them a tip. Our father was a great adventurer, and he was always interested in traveling and learning, and his pet phrase was, turn your disadvantages into your advantage. Maybe that's what he did lying in COVID in the hospital. He then reconciled and went very peacefully. That was what his last expression was before we gave him his last journey. For his wife, he was always reinventing himself. Perhaps somewhere there was a little tune that things were going to make him formless. In his formless form, he's still watching. A tree nurturing more life, insects to fruits to flowers. He is watching. To my dear father, our dear father, Virendra Singh Jafa, a tree from a seed to a nurturing tree. In this presentation on our father, Shri Virendra Singh Jafa, an amazing journey, an amazing man, we have created this metaphor of him as a nurturing tree. Ek achamba, a surprise, where in this world of COVID, everything gets reversed. A 15th century mystical poet, Kabir, wrote this beautiful song, and it is sung by Dr. Subhadra Desai. I will translate the words of the song. The wordings are finding and accepting the truth. Everything is reversed. Oh brother, a wonder have I seen. The lion assembles the cows. A son was born before the mother, and the teacher the Guru fell on the feet of the disciple. The fish gave birth on a tree, and the chicken caught the cat. The bull brought home the camel holding the reins, and the cat led the dog. The branches lay on the ground, and the roots swung above with white flowers blooming on them. Says Kabir, those who understand this song understands the truth and the way of the world.
सभी लोगों को पंडित अनिल जोशी का नमस्कार स्वीकार हो। परम आदरणीय परम श्रद्धेय वंदनीय श्री वीरेंद्र सिंह जाफा जी के स्मृति में आज हम सब लोग एकत्र हुए हैं। वह एक बहुमुखी प्रतिभा के धनी थे। उच्च सरकारी ओहदे के ऊपर आसीन रह करके भी वह सदैव अहंकार रहित उनका जीवन रहा है और स्वाभिमान के साथ उन्होंने जीवन को व्यतीत किया है। सदैव दूसरों के हित में, दूसरों को सहयोग करने में उनका जीवन व्यतीत रहा और एक कुशल सदगृहस्थ थे और धर्मनिष्ठ कर्मनिष्ठ थे, कर्म योगी की तरह उनका जीवन था। सदैव भविष्य में परिवार की चिंता करते थे और उनकी जो जड़ें संस्कारों के साथ जुड़ी थी और जो उन्होंने सुंदर एक बगीचा अपने परिवार का पाल पोष करके बड़ा किया है, वह संस्कार उनके पुत्र पुत्री और आगे पोत्रों में भी वह नजर आते हैं। ऐसे परम श्रद्धेय श्री वीरेंद्र सिंह जाफा जी, जो अपनी धर्मपति पत्नी मनोरमा जी को इतना प्रेम करते थे कि जिसके कारण उनके परिवार के अंदर सदैव एक मिसाल बनी रहती थी। आज उन्होंने एक यात्रा को पूर्ण करके दूसरी यात्रा को प्रारंभ किया है। मैं अपने परिवार की तरफ से और दिल्ली प्रांतीय रामायण सत्संग सभा की ओर से उनके चरणों में हृदय से नमन करते हुए श्रद्धांजलि अर्पित करता हूं और एक ही बात कहूंगा, जो व्यक्ति दूसरों के परहित के लिए कार्य करता है वह सदैव स्मृतियों में याद रहता है और ऐसे व्यक्ति को कभी भी जीवन के अंदर कोई कमी नहीं रहती और उनके बनाए हुए जो संस्कार थे, जो उन्होंने हमको सीख दी है, ऐसे सीख और संस्कारों को अगर हमने जीवन में उतारा तो यही एक सच्ची श्रद्धांजलि उनके प्रति होगी। मैं पुनः पुनः उनको नमन करता हूं और अपने हृदय की शब्दांजलि एवं श्रद्धांजलि अर्पण करता हूं। नमस्कार।
We will end today's presentation by reciting. My Mosi, my mother, and me will be reciting Om Deo Shanti. As we end, our family, both my mother's side and my father's side, have a very strong historical presence in the world of Arya Samaj and Vedic, they're affiliated to Vedic scholarship and practice. So we would like to end with the Om Deo Shanti, which is, or would you like to Om Vishwani Deva se? Vishwani Deva se और फिर Om Deo Shanti. Om Vishwani Deva Savita Duritani Parasuva Yad Bhadram Tanna Asuva Om Hiranya Garva Samadakagre Bhutasya Jata Patireka Asi Sadhadhar Prithvim Vyamute Mam Kasmai Devaya Vishavidema Om Ya Atmada Balada Yasa Visho Upasate Prashisham Yasa Chadiva Yasa Chaya Amritam Yasa Mrityuhu Kasmai Deva Yaha Vishavidema Om Ye Pranato Nimishito Maitvaika Raja Jagato Bahuva Ye She Asidhishvata Kasmai Deva Yaha Vishavidema Om Ye Nadyogra Prithvi Chadina Yena Savitam Yena Naka Yo Tarikshe Rajaso Vimana Kasmai Deva Yavishavidima Om Prajapati Natvadeta Ninyo Vishwajata Niparita Babuva Yakamaste Juhastano Astu Vayam Syama Patayo Rainam Om Sano Bandhu Janita Savithata Dhamani Veda Bhuvanani Vishwa Yatra Deva Amritamana Shana Stitiye Dhamandriyanta Om Agnainaya Supatharaya Asman Vishwani Deva Vayunani Vidvan Yuyodhyasma Jurana Meno Bhushtana Mitutim Vidima Om Deo Shanti Antariksha Gwang Shanti Prithvi Shanti Yapa Shanti Roshadaya Shanti Vanaspataya Shanti Vishwe Deva Shanti Brahma Shanti Sarva Gwang Shanti Shanti Deva Shanti Sama Shanti Reti Om Shanti 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 Tvameva Mata Chapita Tvameva Tvameva Bandhu ch Sakha Tvameva Tvameva Vidya Dharanam Tvameva Tvameva mama deva deva. Om Senavtu Senavtu Selivyam Karvavahe Tajasvi Prasannavadastu Mahavivadesh. My nanny would always recite a prayer. हे भगवान आप ही माता है, आप ही पिता है, आप ही सब जगह की रक्षा करने वाले। हे भगवान ऐसी कृपा कीजिए कि हम आपकी गोद में बैठने के अधिकारी बने और इस जीवन को अपने कर्मों से सफलतावान बनाएं। ओम शांति शांति शांति। आपका बहुत बहुत धन्यवाद। एक I will thank all of you for having joined us. It was getting a whole family together for a person who was a metaphor of a tree. Thank you. On behalf of my mother Manorama, my brother Asim, and myself, the grandchildren Ashira, Tanya, Suvit, and Ash, and of course, his daughter, special daughter-in-law, Maria. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you for having us.
Thank you.